I'm going to turn this over to Adam Gordon as we approach the 9 o'clock hour Eastern time for our next speaker.
Andy, well done. You're like a radio host. The 9 o'clock hour, you got the reset. That was great. No, thank you guys. That was awesome. So the last speaker of day one, Alan Stein, he spoke last year for us and did an unbelievable job. Had some bonus sessions for those in attendance at like 6 a.m. or something, and was just phenomenal. And we're super excited to have him back. Alan has an unbelievable book called Raise Your Game that if you guys haven't read already, you guys should definitely check it out. And he's just released a new coaches edition, Your Game Plan Coaches Edition, and I'll put the link in the chat here. That's a great resource to reinforce habits and mindset training and to help maximize performance. So anyways, I'm sure you guys all know him. We're excited to have him back. Alan Stein.
Thanks, Adam. Well, welcome everyone. And I'm so sorry that I was only able to tune in for these last couple of minutes. I would have given anything to have jumped on right at 6 o'clock and watched everything that went on beforehand, but I had an obligation earlier. But I'm excited to be here with you guys. Anytime I take the stage, whether it's virtual or in person, I always have one goal, and that's to serve you all, to do everything in my power to add as much value to your lives on and off the court that I can, in the next maybe 40 minutes with some ideas that I'll share, but then I'll certainly hang around as long as you guys would like, if you guys want to do some Q&A. And if you can come up with some Qs, I'll do my best to come up with some As. For any of you that were in attendance last year, when I spoke in person, you'll get a little bit of a combination. You will certainly hear some things that I shared last time, but as you know, repetition is not punishment. Repetition is how you get good at anything. So I can promise you that if I said it last time and I'm saying it again tonight, it's because it's important. But you'll also hear some new things. I tried to design a little bit of a different presentation this evening. Even we'll have a little bit of a different format. And again, with the goal of trying to add value to your lives. One thing that's really, really important, I already know, and the coach that was just on that panel said it perfectly, as far as none of these ideas are original. All of these are things that have been passed down to all of us from previous coaching generations and mentors. And then it's our job to take them and internalize them, put our own tweaks and spin on them, run them through the filter of our own convictions and our own coaching philosophy, and then use what, works best for us. But with that said, I have the humility to know that whether you attended my in-person session last time or not, everything I'm going to share tonight, you guys have heard before. Everything I'm going to share tonight, it intuitively and it intellectually. Now, I may say things a little bit differently. I may package them a little bit differently, but this is stuff that you all know. However, and this is a huge disclaimer, just because you know it, it doesn't mean you do it. And really, as coaches, that's one of our number one jobs as we continue to ascend and work towards being the best coaches that we're capable of, is we all have to be very conscious and very intentional in closing the gap between what we know and what we do. And that is called a performance gap. And it is literally the gap between what we know we are supposed to do every single day and what we actually do. So I'm hoping if I do my job tonight, I'm going to confirm some things that you are doing and you're doing well and you're doing regularly, but I'll probably remind you of a few things that you should be doing, but for some reason aren't. And hopefully I can, empower you and challenge you and encourage you to start doing these things more regularly. Because in order to be an impactful and influential and significant coach, you just need to have some basic principles and some basic core beliefs, but you need to do those things as consistently as possible. This is not about making things really complicated. This is not about a lot of sexiness and sizzle and flash. This is about doing the basics and the fundamentals at an elite level, doing them with excellence and doing them consistently. And there is a difference between basic and easy. A lot of people use those words as if they're interchangeable, but they're not. Basic and easy are not synonyms. Everything I'm going to share with you all tonight is very basic in premise, but none of this stuff is easy. None of the things I'm going to share with you are easy to do every single day. The stuff that you're asking your players to do is very basic in premise, but is not easy to do. And that's why coaching is both an art and a science. You know, each and every one of us needs to figure out not only our coaching philosophy, but have the self-awareness and the authenticity and the genuineness to be able to convey that so that we get as much buy-in and believe in as possible. And ultimately, to be the most effective and most significant and influential and impactful coach you can be, it's a matter of how much buy-in and believe in can you elicit from your team into the philosophy that you're developing. And for those of you that can get more buy-in and believe in more consistently, you will be more successful. And that's what all of us should be aiming to do. Prior to diving in, and I've got several lists of threes tonight. That's going to kind of be the theme. Some bullet points that I'll elaborate on, but hopefully is convenient for your note-taking. I want to make sure that you guys understand, and you probably do, hence the reason you're on a Zoom call at 9 o'clock Eastern right now when there's other things that could be vying for your attention, is you have to realize that in order to be the most effective coach possible, or most effective leader, I mean, this stuff has very high utility. You know, this is not just about being the best coach you can be. This is about being the best leader you can be in every single area of your life. You have to learn how to take care of yourself first. You have to learn how to fill your own bucket. Now, if that sounds like that's self-centered and selfish, I want you to look at it through a different lens. See, as a coach and as a leader, you have a lot of people that are counting on you. You have a lot of people that need you to show up every single day as the best version of yourself, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Your team, your coaching colleagues, you know, your assistants or your head coaches, depending on what your role is, your players for sure, they need you to show up every single day, even if showing up is virtual, as your best self. And anytime you don't show up as your best self, that is an act of selfishness because you are giving the team less of a chance to be successful. So it's so important that each and every one of you have the awareness to know what fills your bucket, but then you're also committed with great intentionality and with purpose to filling your bucket so that you can serve others to the best of your ability. You know, there's an old adage that's been around a lot longer than I've been around that says you can't pour anything out of an empty cup, which means if your cup is empty, physically, mentally, and emotionally, you are not able to coach or lead or care for your players to the degree that you're capable of. And that is an act of selfishness. So I want to make sure that each and every one of you makes self-care a very high priority in your life. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to spend hours on end of self-care, but I would love for each and every one of you to dedicate some time, a specific time and a consistent time that you're going to do something every day for yourself. This could be something, you know, from a physical fitness standpoint, some type of working out. This could be something I know on the tail end of the presentation I just saw, talking about feeding your mind with books and with podcasts and so forth. You just need to make sure that you're doing everything you can to be charged up, ready, and full of energy every time you take the court or with your team. And you have to make that commitment. And then once you make that commitment for yourself, what you're doing is you're modeling that behavior for everybody else in your program. I mean, I would imagine that it is a prerequisite that your players show up every day as the best versions of themselves, ready to compete physically, mentally, and emotionally, ready to do everything they can, whether it's a film session, a weight room session, a practice, obviously a game, but they need to have checked off, you know, on their checklist, everything that they need to do to show up to play at the highest level. and you need to make that equal commitment to show up to coach at the highest level. And if you're on this call tonight, you probably understand the importance of filling your bucket. I mean, being on a call like this is a form of self-care because you're taking in information to add tools to your toolbox and refine your coaching philosophy. So just make sure that you're doing something proactive every single day. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to do this presentation this evening a little bit different than some of the others I do. If you've seen my work before, you know that I have an affinity for storytelling, and I really love telling stories because I do believe that stories are one of the stickiest forms of communication that we have. And I share that with you because anytime you can tell a story to your players that is tied directly to a lesson, there is a higher chance that they will remember it and a higher chance that they will recall it. So this could be a story, of a previous team that you've coached or worked with, or, an experience that you had. It could be a story that you've heard, as the third person of maybe an NBA player or so forth. But anytime you can tie something to a story, it will become more memorable and it'll become stickier. And as coaches, that's one of our primary jobs, is to make sure everything that we share is as sticky as possible. Well, another way to make things sticky is to teach in sound bites and is to teach in very short lists. And I've had great experience with teaching things in threes. I find that when you teach in threes, once again, the material becomes stickier. So I have a list of a handful of threes that I will share with you all tonight. And then we'll move right to the Q&A. The first thing I want to share with you are 3 coaching concepts. These are kind of mental constructs that I just want you, again, to evaluate and to reflect on and to then to see if it will fit in your coaching philosophy. Before I do that, though, I want to make sure that you guys know one thing that has really helped me out in my entire career is when I stopped looking at ideas as good or bad or right or wrong. Instead, I just started looking at ideas for fit. So I'm not here to tell you that everything I'm going to share with you tonight is good for you or good for your program. I'm certainly not going to tell you that everything I'm sharing tonight is right. But I'm going to share with you some coaching constructs and some mindsets that have been a good fit for me in my coaching philosophy. And then you need to decide whether or not they're a good fit for you in your coaching philosophy. So the 3 coaching concepts. Number 1 is ask more and tell less. As coaches, we often overcoach the game, to be honest. We often do so much directing and so much telling that we don't do enough asking to make sure that our players are comprehending what it is that we're trying to teach them and coach them, but also giving them some ownership over the decisions that they're making. Let's just look at this practice scenario, if you will. Let's just imagine you've got a 5-on-5 scrimmage going on, and the point guard on one of the teams comes down and throws a bad pass to the wing and turns the ball over. I think a very average or mediocre coach will stop practice, blow the whistle, will most likely berate that player for 15 to 20 seconds, tell them what a bonehead they are for making such a dumb pass, and then just have play resume. Well, there's really not a lesson being learned there. I think a much more impactful way would be to stop practice and blow the whistle and ask that point guard what it was that they saw at that point in time that they made the pass, and why did they think at that time that was the right pass to make. One acknowledgement we have to have as coaches is, for the most part, with minimal exception, our players try to do the right thing at the right time. Now, they're doing so through their own lens and oftentimes through their very limited basketball IQ, but at least make the concession that point guard did not come down and intentionally try to turn the ball over just to piss you off. Like, at that time, they thought that was the right play to make, and obviously hindsight has shown that it wasn't. But ask them what it was that they saw. With their court vision, what made them think that was the right play? And then just be quiet. Don't lead the witness. Let them explain why they thought that was the right play. And then, instead of telling them what they should have done instead, ask them, ask them what was, now that we clearly know that that was not the right play to make, what would have been a better decision? And then once again, be quiet and let them explain another option or something that could have led to a different outcome. And then the third pillar of that is kind of rewind and go back to that exact same scenario and let them replay the situation that just occurred. So basically tell everyone to go back to where they were on the court 20 seconds ago and have that point guard have the ball, and then tell them to go ahead and play it from here. And let's see if we can get a different outcome. And that may take a couple of minutes, but I can promise you that by asking them what they saw and making them own the mistake that they made, then asking them what they could have done to get a better resolution, and then allowing them to rewind the tape and try it again, a mulligan, if you will, the lesson they'll learn from that will be so much stickier and so much more impactful, not just for the player that made the turnover, but for everybody else on the team. Now, I'm well aware that every time you blow the whistle in practice, you can't stop and have a 2 to 3 minute back and forth dialogue, deconstruction session like this. So you may have to use this sparingly. But overall, just consider the mental concept of asking more and telling less. Number 2, do everything you can to promote more autonomy with your team. Give your team more say in what it is that you do during practice, and there are a variety of different ways you can implement this. But instead of you as the coach or as the coaching staff always being the one that not only designs the practice plan, but tells them every single drill that they're going to do and, who's going to be shooting partners and what basket they're going to be at, give them some autonomy. I had the great fortune of working for Mike Jones for 6 years, the head basketball coach at DeMatha Catholic High School. And he really did a tremendous job of this. He would certainly work with his assistants to have a really detailed practice plan every time he took the court. But he would leave some areas open that he would give the players some say. He would give them some autonomy. So he may say, hey, we've blocked off 15 minutes for shooting drills, but I'm going to let you guys pick which shooting drills we do. So therefore, he's still got control over the flow of practice. He still created the skeleton and the model of practice, but he lets the players pick, which drills they want to do. And of course, it's not a free-for-all. This is not a time for them to start making up drills. Maybe he has a menu of 24 shooting drills that the DeMatha players do regularly, but they're free to pick any drills from that menu of 24 that they want. And this does a few things. One, when you give them autonomy, you're showing them that you trust them to make good decisions, that you believe in them to make the right decisions, and that you care enough to know what it is that they want to do. And that's going to increase both buy-in and believe in. So anytime you can, give some autonomy. And depending on your team, now if you have a veteran team, mostly seniors, and you have some just tremendous leaders, I mean, you can extend that leash a little bit further. You can actually let them design some of the practice. Maybe you only come in with less of a skeleton of your practice plan and let them pick some of the things. But it's vital that as coaches, and this one really piggybacks on number 1, that we're not just directing every single step our players take. We're getting some autonomy and some decision-making from them. And then number 3 is practice what wins. The best person I know of to explain this deeper is Bart Lundy and Grant Leonard, 2 of the coaches at Queens in Charlotte, a Division II program that is just absolutely phenomenal. And those guys and the rest of their staff do a phenomenal job. But one of the things that I think they've really narrowed down is they've really dug through the analytics and the numbers and through watching tape and obviously through their own observation. They know what the key metrics are that will increase the chance of them being successful, after the jump ball. They know what things are most important to them that will move the needle when it comes to winning. And, let's just say you narrow it down to, how many free throws you attempt, how many offensive rebounds you get, and maybe 2 other metrics. But once you've figured out with your style of play and with your coaching philosophy, what is going to give you the highest percentage chance of winning, then make sure that is what you're practicing the most. And I know that almost sounds too obvious that, why would I even have to say that? But it's so important that you guys realize that a good portion of practice plans in general, even run by some really elite coaches, contain a lot of fluff, and you got to trim the fat. Some coaches just do drills for the sake of doing drills. Well, if you figure out that, if you shoot more free throws than your opponent even attempts, and when you win the offensive boards and maybe a couple of other metrics, if those are the things that almost guarantee you'll win the game, then most of what you do in practice should be geared around those things. You should be doing things that, drills and situations that improve the aggressiveness of going to the basket, which will increase the chance that you'll get fouled, which then will put you on the line more than your opponent. You need to do drills where you're making sure that you are not fouling your opponent so that you're not sending them to the line. Are you spending a tremendous amount of time emphasizing the importance of crashing the offensive glass so that you will always win the offensive rebounding differential? If you know that's what's going to lead to winning, then that's what you need to practice. Very similarly, when it comes to individual players, I would hope that part of what you as a coach outline for each player is what's a good shot for them. Basketball is not an equal opportunity sport. All 15 players should not have the same green light to shoot the same shot during a game. Clearly, they're going to have varying levels of skill when it comes to shooting the basketball. And obviously, your better shooters should get more shots and should get the green light from more areas on the court. I mean, that's just common sense. But every single player should have almost a color-coded shot chart, if you will, of what's a good shot for them. And obviously, that's for you and the coaching staff to decide what's a good shot. But you need to be able to say with great clarity what is a good and what is a bad shot for every single player. And once you have that mapped out, then make sure that during practice, especially during shooting drills, that each player is shooting from the spots that is a good shot for them to shoot in the game. There's no reason to always divide the court up into those same 5 shooting spots, corner, wing, top of the key, wing, and corner. If you have a player that is never going to shoot from the baseline based on your offense, why would you have them spend 40% of their time practicing a shot that they're not going to take in a game? That's just not being efficient with your time. So figure out where your players need to get their shots from, and then make sure that's worked into every single shooting drill. And that really piggybacks on top of practice what wins. One of the things that I love about what the Queen staff does is they kind of use that as their terminology, and they don't tell a player, that was a bad shot. What they say is that a shot that you practice? And if the answer to that is no, then everybody in the room knows then that's not a shot you should be taking. If it's not a shot that we told you is one of your, is where you get the green light, and it's not a shot that you're practicing regularly during practice, then it better not be a shot that you take during the game. And I just really love the way that they frame that. So practice what wins. And the more granular you can get in knowing exactly what wins, and then the more you can emphasize that, now you're being incredibly efficient with everything you do in practice. So for our 3 coaching concepts, ask more and tell less, give as much autonomy as you can, and practice what wins. And I keep glancing at the clock because, as you guys can see, I love to talk, and I want to make sure I don't run over my 40 to 45 minutes. The next thing I want to share are 10 team exercises, if you will, that you can do with your team on a pretty consistent basis. The first is called 10 assists. And this is actually an off the court exercise or something that you can weave into the culture of your program. 10 assists, basically would mean every single person on your team, and I think this is great for coaches to do as well. Every morning when you wake up, I want you to put 10 rubber bands on your left wrist. And every time you give a teammate an assist, and an assist is anything that you do that adds value to their life or makes their life easier. Anything you do to help a teammate out off the court, you take one rubber band off of your left wrist and you put it on your right wrist. But here's the rub. You can't go to sleep at night until all 10 rubber bands are on your right wrist. Until you know for a fact that you've done nothing short of 10 tangible things to serve a teammate off the court, to add value to their lives, to help them in some way, you can't go to sleep. So if we can get everyone on the team to be incredibly intentional and purposeful about serving their teammates and dishing out assists, again, off the court, you're going to create a heightened level of cohesion, a heightened level of chemistry. And what it really does is it promotes and emphasizes the mindset of being a great teammate. You know, be the type of teammate that you want to play with. And we all want to be with teammates that are willing to dish out assists both on and off the court. The next one, and this is one of my favorite exercises of all time. We can just call it index card superlatives, if you will. So here's what you do with your team. And any of these things can be done virtually, just so you know. Sometimes they take a little bit more creativity to do them virtually. But if anyone listening to this is still facing certain restrictions of what you can and can't do with the team, hopefully these are things that will still apply. For index card superlatives, basically you would pass out a handful of index cards to everybody on the team and you give them a pin. And you and the rest of the staff are going to come up with a list of superlatives. Some of them will be positive, some of them will be negative. But you're going to ask the team to simply write down the name of the player that they believe best fits. And this is completely anonymous. So, all we want them to write down is the name of the other player or their teammate. Inevitably, one of the first questions you're going to get is, well, can I put my own name down? And yes, if you believe that you are the right fit for this superlative, then by all means, feel free to write your own name down. But I'll give you a couple of examples. And I don't say this because I don't want you to feel confined to what I share with you. I want you guys to use your own imagination and your own creativity to figure out which ones would work best for you. But the first one is, let's just say you ask, who is the most talented player on our team? And just leave it at that. Let them decide, how to define talent. But who is the most talented player on our team? And they each write down a name. They pass the cards in. And you can put a rubber band around them and a little Post-it note that says most talented. Then you can ask, who is the hardest worker on our team? Same format. They write it down, pass the cards in. Who is the most selfless player on our team? Who is the most mentally tough player on our team? And come up with any of these that you want. And I do think there's equal value in asking them some on the negative side. Who is the most selfish player on the team? Who's the least hard worker on the team? Who's the softest player on the team? And because this is all anonymous, no one should feel as though they're being called out. And how you and your staff choose to use this information is completely up to you. But I find that it's powerful for a few different reasons. One, it's actually coming from the team. It's coming from, their teammates. So this immediately throws that mindset of, well, coach has his favorites, or the coaching staff doesn't like me. We're throwing that out the window because it's actually coming from the players. And then you can decide how best to use that information. I've always been one that believes you praise publicly and you criticize in private. So I would not recommend calling a player out in front of the team and saying, hey, everybody voted you the most selfish player. I don't know that would necessarily give you a positive response, but that's certainly something you could discuss with that player in the privacy of a one-on-one meeting, in your office, and just say, your teammates by an overwhelming margin believe you are the least hard worker on this team. how does that make you feel? What can you do about that to change that narrative and to give them more confidence in the effort you put forth? But this will also, as a coaching staff, give you some insight to the team that you're working with. Because I can tell you now, if your most talented player is also voted the hardest worker and possibly also voted the most selfless, you're probably going to over-index with that team. That team's going to be as successful as your talent will allow. But if your most talented player is also your most selfish player, or your most talented player is the softest player or the least hard worker, you're going to have some issues. It's going to be really challenging for your team to maximize their potential. So these are all things that can just be done to give you some insight. And then the third coaching exercise is what I just call pass the compliment. And this one, again, works incredibly well in person, but is also a way, you can find a way to do this remotely or virtually if needed. What you do is you take a sheet of paper and you write one player's name at the top of it. And you could do one player per practice or per meeting, however you want. And you have their name at the top, and then you just pass it around the room, and every single other player is going to write down, and this is where you guys can actually get creative. Maybe you say, all right, I want you guys to write down the best skill set that they have, on the court. So maybe it's rebounding, maybe it's defense, maybe they're a knockdown shooter. Maybe you could ask them, write down what makes them a great teammate, or what it is that you appreciate about them, or what is it they do to contribute to this team. And ultimately, when it gets back to that player, you'll have 14 other people that have written something down that's certainly positive in nature, but will be encouraging and will be empowering. And many times, if you guys pick the right question to ask, the things that they write down are things that they don't necessarily know. They didn't know their teammate values this thing that they do to contribute to the team. They didn't know that the rest of the team thinks this is something they do that is a huge asset to the team's ability to be successful. So by doing this, again, you are encouraging the intentionality of getting folks focused on praising, because that which gets praised gets repeated. You get them focused on communicating to a teammate what it is that you appreciate about them. So now you're constantly promoting this attitude of gratitude. And it can be very, very eye-opening for the player that receives that, because they might start reading some compliments that they simply didn't know. They didn't know that that's how their teammates felt. So it can be something really, really powerful. So the three coaching exercises, once again, are 10 assists, the index card superlatives, and pass the compliment. And now I'm going to give you three coaching mantras, and then that'll probably take us to about the 40 after mark. And I can take a deep breath and certainly take any cues you guys have. I'll do my best to give you some A's. If not, if we hear some of those crickets that I've seen before on some Zoom calls, I've got a couple more, sets of three that I'd be happy to share. But these are three practice necessities for you all. And I learned these again from Mike Jones, the head coach at DeMatha Catholic High School. And there is not a single DeMatha practice that does not include these three components. The first component is fundamentals. Every single time DeMatha takes the court, it doesn't matter what time of year it is, they're going to do something to work on the skills of the game: shooting, passing, rebounding, defending, and handling the ball. They're going to do something to work on and focus on the fundamentals. It may be a series of ball handling and passing drills. It may be a series of shooting drills, might be a combination, but there is not a practice that goes by that they do not emphasize the fundamentals of the game. And the fundamentals, or basics, if you will, are something that we have to make sure get reinforced and emphasized and even taught to a degree every single practice. Now, some practices, this might be a 10-minute block of time. Some practices, it might be a 35-minute block of time, but every single practice will include fundamentals. Number two, there's always going to be a competitive element. There's going to be some type of competition in every single practice. The ability to compete is a learned skill. If you look at the whole nature nurture, binary filter, if you will, yes, I do believe some players very early in their lives were raised in more of a competitive environment, and it seems to come more naturally to them. But you can absolutely teach players how to become more competitive. And in order to do that, you have to emphasize it. We're going to get whatever it is that we emphasize. We're going to get whatever it is that we reinforce. And when it comes to competition, we can compete in a variety of different ways. Competition really comes down to, do I commit myself to preparing to give the best that I'm able to give? It's not just about winning and losing. I mean, that is a part of competition, but it's also about making a commitment to be better than I was yesterday or better than I was at a previous practice. So you can have players compete against themselves for a personal best. You can have them compete against the clock. You can have them compete against each other one-on-one or even in small groups. You can have them compete in shooting drills or scrimmage situations, whatever it may be, but there's not a single practice that goes by that the DeMatha players aren't asked to compete in some fashion. And when players compete consistently, it also increases focus, increases effort, and absolutely increases buy-in and believe in, because now they've got some skin in the game. You've raised the stakes from just doing a normal shooting drill to putting some components on it that make it competitive. Can you make more shots than you made last practice? Can you make X number of shots in this amount of time? Can team A make more shots than team B? So anything you can do that promotes and encourages competition is going to help reinforce the fact that that is a learned behavior and skill. And then the third trait that happens in every single practice, or should happen in every single practice, are some type of game situations. Coach Jones always wanted the DeMatha team to feel prepared for any situation that could arise during the game. So every single practice, there would be some type of 5-on-5 scrimmage scenario, and he would put parameters in place. Blue team is up 3, against white team, and there's 1 minute and 27 seconds left. White team has the ball. He would lay out kind of some game situations and let the team play from there. And this would sometimes be something like, blue team is up 1, white team has the ball under the basket. You've got 3 seconds left, and now you've got to run a baseline out of bounds play. But he wanted to do his best to cover every single scenario possible in practice, so there were fewer surprises when the game hit. One of the things that absolutely increases confidence and composure during performance time is having gone through those same situations during practice time, during preparation time. So while you can't mimic every potential scenario, you can certainly look for some trends, and you'll increase your team's success of executing that, baseline out of bounds play when the game is on the line, if they've gone through that in practice. This also leads to a coaching mindset that you should do your best to make really important decisions during low pressure times. And these are the decisions that you'll use during high pressure times. So, with the natural emotion that will ebb and flow and roller coaster during a game, that's not the best time to start drawing up a brand new play. When there's 3 seconds left and the game is tied, that's not the best time to start making stuff up. That's the best time to go back to the things that you decided would be most successful during a very low pressure time. And you should have these scenarios planned out in advance. So that way you and your staff knows, if we get to the end of this game and we are down 1 or 2 with X number of time on the clock and it's our ball, we already know this is what we're going to run. We've already decided this, when emotions were low and we were clear-headed to make, crystal clear decisions. This is what we're going to be able to execute. So make sure that during practice, you're doing everything you can to go through game situations. You're doing everything you can to heighten competitiveness, and you're doing everything you can to integrate, emphasize, and promote the importance of the fundamentals of the game. And if you can do those 3 things every practice, make those part of your skeleton, that consistency will start to add up. So with that, that was quite a mouthful for almost 40 minutes. So I'll take a deep breath and a short virtual bow. And I don't know how you guys have been handling questions, Adam. I don't know if folks just unmute themselves and ask, but whatever format you've been doing is certainly great with me, my friend.
Okay, great. Yeah, if you have a question, shoot me a line in the chat and we'll call on you. We have one from Matt. And go ahead and introduce yourself and ask away.
Is that me, Matt? There's a lot of Matts.
That's you, Matt.
Okay. Hi. Thank you, Coach, for taking some time with us. My name is Matt Elkin. Really excited to get to hear from you tonight. And I wanted to ask, as a basketball fan and just somebody who's kind of followed you and your progression, you've done a lot with training, you've done a lot with coaching, you've done a lot with speaking. How has it been for you kind of evaluating where your passions lie and maybe how that has changed or evolved? Is it something that you got an opportunity and you found that you enjoyed it, so you wanted to put more time and energy into that? Or is it like a calculated effort on your end to say, I want to move in this direction as my career or family or whatever kind of grows?
Arguably the best piece of advice I ever received, and I was at a pretty young age, and this is the advice I most readily offer young people, is to find what it is that you love to do, find what it is that you're pretty good at, and then find where those two things intersect. So find what you're passionate about, find where your talents lie, and then find where those things intersect. And for my entire life, literally from the age of 4 to present day at 44, that has involved the game of basketball. I'm incredibly passionate about the game of basketball. And thankfully, I've always kind of had a knack for coaching, teaching, communicating, speaking, sharing, anything under that umbrella. So for me, that point of intersection has where I've it's where I've decided with great intention to spend the bulk of my time and certainly the bulk of my professional career. Now, as you mentioned, that little point of intersection has moved around a little bit. 15 years ago, I was incredibly passionate about improving on-court athleticism and teaching ways for players to be bigger, faster, and stronger. So that's really where my point of intersection was, and that's where I put all of my focus. Then slowly that started to shift to, I really enjoyed speaking at coaching clinics and teaching coaches how to train their players. But it was still the same ingredients of doing what I love and doing something that I was fairly decent at. And the most recent iteration of that is what I do mostly now, which is corporate speaking, and teach folks in the business world how to apply all of the same lessons and mindsets and disciplines that we all live and breathe, and show them how to apply that to their lives and to their businesses. So I've stayed true to the original recipe of finding where that point of intersection is. And I simply call that your strength zone. We talk all the time about comfort zones, and we need to get out of comfort zones to grow. And I agree with that completely. But if your goal is to be as happy as possible, as fulfilled as possible, and as significant as possible, then you need to make sure you are pouring in to your strength zone, that point of intersection. And to answer your question, it really comes down to the individual. I know some folks, and there might be some on this call, that their point of intersection has been, college basketball coaching. And there are folks that can do that for 30 or 40 years and love every second of it. And they don't waver, and that point never moves. Then there's some folks that every 2 or 3 years, they develop new strengths or they uncover new passions, and their point of intersection can move. So really, I think it comes down to, for each and every one of us, having the self-awareness to keep reflecting on where do my talents lie and what do I love the most, and see where that point takes you. And then having the courage to follow that. I've loved every minute that I've spent around the game, but in full transparency, I started to approach burnout with just being on court, teaching players to improve their athleticism. That didn't light me up to the degree that some of these other things were. And I have so much respect for players. I have so much respect for the coaching fraternity. And I have so much respect for the game of basketball that I knew that if I continued to stay in something that I wasn't fully passionate about, I was cheating them, I was cheating myself, and I was cheating the game. So I decided to move my point to somewhere else. And right now, I'm absolutely loving what I'm doing. But 5 years from now, my point might move again. And that I'm okay with. As long as I stay true to myself and I stay true to that formula of staying in your strength zone, I don't think you can go wrong.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Matt.
Okay, let's go to Ben.
Hey, Coach, just to reiterate what Matt said, thank you for taking some time here tonight to be with us and to help us grow as people and coaches. I want to take it back to something you said almost at the very beginning about how important self-care is, because as a coach, you know, it is selfish if you're coming out and you're not bringing your best to the table, because then how can you expect the same thing from your players? And there's a line actually from this month's Rising Coaches Book Club book, Winning in the Dark. Our author writes, and your best might not be the same from one day to the next. Some days you may only have 30% in your tank, but you got to learn how to give 100% of that 30%. So can you just talk for a minute or two about, all right, if you really can't bring 100% to the table, you know, everyone's going to have an off day at some point. How do you best focus that energy to get 100% of your 30%?
I love that. And I absolutely agree. Each of us can make the conscious decision to give 100% of whatever it is that we have. And that's the same mindset and grace and compassion we should be extending to our players. I mean, in a perfect world, every player shows up with their tank full to 100 and they give 100% of that 100 every day. But if we're realists, we understand that's not going to happen. That is going to ebb and that's going to flow. And a couple of thoughts. One, to me, I don't believe success is haphazard. I think success is a direct result of our habits, our systems, and our processes. It's a direct result of the routines that we develop. So first and foremost, if we can make sure that self-care is one of these habits, it is a priority, it is something we've created a routine around, we will be more consistent in getting closer to that 100% to give more often than not. Yes, we're still going to have off days. There's still going to be a day maybe you don't feel well. There's a day that for whatever reason you just couldn't sleep the night before. I mean, you practice a nightly routine to do the best you can to get quality sleep, and you're still kind of walking the hallways at 3 a.m. So there are things that can absolutely impede our ability to show up as a 100, but I think we can be so much more consistent if we make that a priority. And unfortunately, this is just what I've noticed with so many coaches. A lot of coaches do a really good job of that during the off season, where they have a little bit more discretionary time. And I say little more because I realize no coach has tons of discretionary time. You guys are so altruistic. You're always pouring into your craft, but they do a better job of working out and eating right and getting sleep during the off season. And then when the season hits and they're focused on watching film, they're focused on recruiting, they're focused on scouting, they're focused on designing practice plans, then they tend to put all of those things first and they stop working out and they stop getting sleep. They start burning the candle at both ends. They stop eating well, because now it's just easier to go through the drive-through and grab a burger and fries than it is to prepare something that's a little bit healthier. And they revert back to old systems and processes that make them less consistent and less likely to show up as their best selves. And they're doing it with noble intentions. In their mind, they're thinking, hey, I need to pour into the practice plan. I need to scout. I need to recruit. But what they don't understand is they're wearing themselves out. And now they're only doing each of these things at a much lower percentage than they'd be able to do if they filled their tank first. So to answer your question, I think it just comes down to creating habits, systems, and processes. And one of the ways to help with that is to have a system of accountability with the staff, is being able to check in on each other. If you and I are on the same staff and I notice that you come in one day as a 30%, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do everything I can to make up for the 70% that you're lacking. So if you're a little bit tired and you're not bringing the enthusiasm that you normally bring, I'm going to do everything I can to have your back and raise my game during that practice. But if I start to notice that consistently as your teammate, I'm going to want to know what's going on. I'm going to want to know why for the last 4 days have you shown up as the less version of yourself? And you may say, well, you know, I have an infant at home and there's just not a whole lot I can do about these things. And that's just part of life. But more than likely, I'll find out that you've stopped making yourself a priority and you haven't been as committed to self-care. And as a teammate, I'm going to want to help you with that. I'm going to want to help you see your blind spot, and I'm going to tell you the things that you need to hear, not the things that you want to hear, to try to get you back on track. Because as your teammate, I need you to start showing up as close to 100% as you can, because you're taking lunch off of my plate every time you don't do that. And I'm simply not going to allow that. That's kind of the sanctity of the locker room. This is where we have to police each other. So that is a very long-winded answer. So the summary version is focus on habits, systems, and processes that prioritize your self-care so that you will more likely and more consistently show up as your best self. But you are 100% correct. If you only show up with 80%, give 100% of that 80%.
No, I really like that. You know, self-care, it doesn't have to be this big thing, but as you're saying, something more consistent to keep you in that habit. I really like that. So thank you.
My pleasure. And you know what? One of the things that everyone on this call should do, if you haven't already, is generate a list of the things that fill your bucket. What are they? You know, maybe it's doing yoga or taking a spin class. Maybe it's going for a run. Maybe it's doing some calisthenics or lifting weights. Maybe it's reading a book or listening to a podcast. Maybe it's meditation or prayer. Maybe it's getting up really early in the morning during the stillness and you know, watching an inspirational video while you have your morning coffee. Just figure out the list of things that you know recharge your battery and fill you up. And you'll have a list. Could be 3 or 4 things, could be 9 or 10. And then what I want you to do is dissect the bookends of your day. I want you to write down how do you spend the first 60 minutes of every morning when you wake up, and how do you spend the last 60 minutes before you go to bed? And I really want you to get pretty granular on what you do during the bookends of your day. And then I want you to compare those 2 lists. I want you to see, are you making time during the morning and evening routine to do the things that you know fill your bucket? And if your answer is no, you're being selfish. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it. And I say it with a smile because I don't have any malice intent behind that. But you're being selfish if you're not doing that. And this goes far beyond coaching. You know, if you have a spouse or a significant other, if you have children or you're a leader at your church, I mean, these people are counting on you to be your best. And you cannot be the best mother or father, husband or wife, or coach if you're not doing that. And this is why you have to make that a priority. So, and the other part that's beautiful is you don't have to spend tons of time doing it. You know, 20 to 30 minutes of focused, intentional time in the morning and in the evening can be enough to keep your battery almost fully charged at all times. And I just encourage everyone to make that commitment.
No, that's great. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Any other questions? I think that's all the ones that we had queued up, Alan.
I got 2 last parting shots, if that's cool, and then we can make it a wrap.
Okay.
The first is there's this one's pretty short. There are 3 things that I'll either call performance killers or culture killers. They're performance killers for us as individuals and as coaches. They're culture killers if these things run rampant in your program, and that is blaming, complaining, and making excuses. Those 3 things, and I use absolutes very sparingly, but blaming, complaining, and making excuses will never, ever improve your situation, make things better, or help you progress, ever. So any time or energy that you put into blaming, complaining, or making excuses is a colossal waste of your time, and it will drain you of energy, and it will undermine your ability to perform at the level you're capable of. And it will do the exact same thing on a team level or an organizational level. Now, with that said, this is where I definitely have to remind you of the difference between basic and easy. You know, I don't think I confused anyone when I said blaming, complaining, or making excuses. Those are very basic concepts, but those things are not easy to eliminate. especially not during the year 2020. I mean, we've all faced more than enough challenges this year. I mean, from a global pandemic to severe social unrest from all of the racial inequalities and racial injustices to the divisiveness that's created by it being an election year. And in-person school and in-person sports have been heavily disrupted. There has never been a time in human history that would be easier for us to make excuses, to complain, and to blame someone or something. I mean, that is the easiest default in the world right now. And it's one that most people take, but it's not going to help. 2020 is not going to improve if you start blaming, complaining, and making excuses. So I want to encourage you to do your best to come as close to eliminating those three things from your behavior as possible. And then hold everyone on your team accountable to doing the same thing. When you hear a player or a coaching colleague blaming, complaining, or making an excuse, with some grace and some compassion and some humility, call them out on that and let them know, hey, I feel you, and maybe you're just trying to vent, but this isn't doing anything to help. If you can get rid of those three things, it is like taking an emotional weight vest off. You will immediately become more nimble, and you'll think clearer. You'll be in problem solver mode. I mean, you'll make sure that when you get rid of those three things, you can put your time and focus and energy into something that absolutely will move the needle forward. And then my last parting shot, this is just a filter that I use that is really helpful in my own life. And I'm going to explain it in one way, but you guys are welcome to use this however you think would be most beneficial to you. But it's really about getting crystal clear on an outcome and then developing a system for a process that will increase the chance of that outcome coming true. I'm 44 years old. I have this vision of the man I want to be 20 years from now. So I can picture with great clarity the Alan Stein Jr. that's 64 years old. Now, with that being said, I'm fully aware that time is not promised and tomorrow is not guaranteed. There is nothing that promises that I'll even live to see the age of 64. But because I take pretty good care of myself, unless something unforeseen or catastrophic happens, most likely I would hope that I'll be 64 at some point. So without getting into too much detail for you all, here's who I want to be when I'm 64. I want the 64-year-old Alan to be physically, mentally, and emotionally fit. I want the 64-year-old Alan to have a very deep connection with his children, his family, his friends, his colleagues, his the most important people in his life, his inner circle. I want the 64-year-old Alan to be doing what he considers meaningful work that is in service of others. So that's kind of who I picture myself being 20 years from now. Now, to be process-driven, every single decision I make in my life, from what I choose to watch on Netflix to what I post on Instagram to what I eat for lunch, I run through the filter of, is doing this thing going to take me closer to becoming that person, or is it going to take me further away? By doing this, by making this decision, am I increasing the chance that that's the man I'm going to become, or am I decreasing the chance? And then obviously my goal every single day of my life is to try to make as many decisions as possible, large and small, that are in alignment with becoming that guy. And if I can do that, and I'm not aiming for perfection, I never worry about perfection. I only worry about progress because I'm not batting 1,000. You better believe there are a handful of decisions I make every week that are not in alignment with becoming that guy. But my goal is to mitigate those and eradicate those as much as possible. But if the overwhelming majority of decisions I make are in alignment with becoming that guy, and I do in fact live to see the age of 64, then that is who I will become. I'm designing my own future by the decisions that I'm making now. And I tell you that because you can use the same for your life, or you could even break it down and say, who's the coach that you want to be 1 year from now? Like, get clarity. What type of coach do you want to be 1 year from now? And then do everything in your power to make sure every decision you make on and off the court are in alignment with becoming that coach. And then it just comes down to your consistency. And if you're consistently making good decisions, then you will consistently progress. And, one of the last things I ask myself every night before I go to bed is, I just traded 24 hours of my life for the progress that I made today. Am I happy with that trade? And if most nights I can put my head on my pillow and say, you know what, I'm happy that I made this progress today. It was worth trading a portion of my life for it, then I know that I'm moving in the right direction. And that is the last thought that I will leave you all with. Do not worry about where you are right now at this moment. Instead, be more focused on the direction that you are going. Where you are right now is not near as important as the direction you're going. And as long as your arrow and your ramp is pointed up and you know that you're moving in the right direction, then it's simply a matter of time and consistency, and you'll eventually get where it is that you're trying to go. So last thing, there's 3 resources that I hope you all find helpful. First and foremost, if you go to alansteinjr.com/free, there's a whole host of videos and downloads. There's an 8-page PDF that has all of my notes from my talks. There's video clips of different stories and lessons. By all means, take advantage of any of and everything on that page. Number 2, if you have read the book and you think it'd be something that's my book, that is, not a book, that you think would be helpful for your team, I can give you a 42% discount and can sign every copy, even personalize them to each player if that would be helpful. Just go to raiseyourgamebook.com. There's a form there for a team order. And again, I can give you a 42% discount. And then lastly, Adam was kind enough to mention that if you go to makeyourgameplan.com, there is now a coach's edition. And there are a few different bundles in case you want to get the student athlete edition for your team. And I can do you one better. If you use the coupon code Rising Coaches, that'll give you 50% off any of the bundles or any of the courses that you buy. I put this content out. Certainly it's how I make my living, but more importantly, I put content out because I'm hoping that it serves you guys. You know, I'm incredibly thankful to be a part of the coaching fraternity. The game of basketball has been really, really good to me in my life. So anything I can do to champion the game and certainly to help coaches, I always want to do it. I can't tell you how much I respect and appreciate and admire the Rising Coaches organization and everybody that's a part of it. So I consider us family. So lastly, if you ever need me, just email me, alan@alansteinjr.com, and I'll do anything I can to help you out. So with that, now I'll finally shut my pie hole.
Alan, great job. Thank you so much. You do such a great job of making complex things sound very, very simple and digestible. So we appreciate it. Just a couple PSAs. Appreciate you guys being on here tonight. I know it's late, so we'll wrap up. Just a couple things for tomorrow at 11:30 Eastern. If any of you guys are interested, we started a mentorship program for our members where we pair up coaches with mentors. Sounds pretty basic, right? We put together an unbelievable team of mentors, including Joe Prunty, who was the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, Ty Ellis, head coach of the G League team for the Kings, Heather Macy, Daryl Jacobs. I know I'm leaving people out, but if you're interested in that, they'll be hosting a Zoom tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. And then we also we'll get started with our live programming again at 6 o'clock tomorrow night. But we'll be sneaking in there a recorded interview with Dean Oliver. For those of you guys that don't know, Dean Oliver is like the pioneer of NBA analytics. He works with the Wizards. And Sergio Santamaria, who some of you guys may know, is the one that did the interview. Sergio is the former head of analytics for the Phoenix Suns. So if you guys are into analytics, it's two of them going at it. I'm sure it's going to be way over my head, but I'm looking forward to it. So that'll be snuck in there as well. So again, thank you guys for being here tonight. Hope we see you guys again tomorrow. And feel free to reach out with any questions or anything like that regarding the member site for those of you guys on a free trial. Thanks again, everybody.